Yeah, I think that's a great question. I know one of the things that I always counsel my patients about who I'm seeing for MASLD is that usually problems with our metabolism are really complex and there's no one single thing that has kind of gone awry. And one of the sort of inspirations for this project was really kind of leading into that, there's these complex interactions with not only, what we're eating or how we're using these energy stores, but also our genetics, our environment, stress, kind of the realities of our life. And thinking about things through sort of a population health lens, the kind of continuing increase in incidence of MASLD and that really being demonstrated across both pediatrics and adults wanted me, kind of led me to really think about sort of what might be going on much earlier than when I'm meeting someone in the clinic with this problem already going on. So I think honestly, this project was helpful in kind of contextualizing that whole sort of process and lending itself to maybe, kind of earlier efforts, engaging the whole family might have, improvements in health much further down the line across generations. Yeah. So, I think this being, an observational study, like thinking about this through a population health lens, what we're really hoping to help describe is just things that maybe we haven't considered that might play a role in health and disease, particularly with MASLD. So this, I think, is quite interesting in the sense that it's not necessarily the person who we're seeing right then and there and what their BMI is and kind of what their, other metabolic health kind of markers are looking like. But that sort of risk for disease might develop much earlier on. And I think having this more longitudinal life course perspective on it reinvigorates, sort of efforts from a public health standpoint to intervene earlier on in life. And potentially have much bigger impact if you can successfully do that. Yeah. We, the way that we kind of structured the study tried to address that a little bit in terms of, how does this make clinical sense? So looking at not only sort of those parental risk factors at that sort of developmental stage, but also how the individual child and their kind of adiposity over early life later influences their odds of MASLD played an important role too. So we did specifically a mediation analysis looking at cumulative excess adiposity amongst the children from ages 7 to 17. And the way we did that was we sort of developed kind of like the obesity version of a pack year score, looking at kind of intensity and duration of excess adiposity for these children, and really found that about two-thirds of that increased odds of MASLD was explained by that alone. So I think when we're at the bedside, especially as pediatric hepatologists or pediatric providers, thinking through, I think having these discussions earlier on in kids who are at risk is important. And you can kind of, frame that and get the whole family involved, thinking about those future generations too. Yeah. So I think one of the things that is exciting about our work is just the extra questions that it generates. So I think from an academic standpoint, what really this work calls out for is a lot more research from a mechanistic side of things, because that is one thing when you're doing an observational, more population health style study, you can't really get to the nuts and bolts of what you're seeing. I think that there's been some really great preclinical work exploring how paternal obesity or maternal obesity might play a role here. But definitely a lot more research is needed to kind of explore the exact mechanisms there. And specifically, how things might be modifiable, because that's a question that I think remains unanswered is if you do these interventions, what are the long-term outcomes for a parent who maybe has had successful weight loss? Do things change in terms of their child's risk later on? Yeah, yeah. I think to speak a little bit more specifically about some of those unanswered questions. A couple of the sort of preclinical studies that have been done so far do suggest, a role of epigenetics and potentially even like dysbiosis for early infants exposed to, different changes to their gut microbiome that may or may not be controlled by, maternal obesity changes and exposures to different diets. That's research that's been pretty compelling, but of course it's a little bit limited in number. And I think the more that we can sort of look into this and help sort of better describe our understanding, it'll open up further avenues for actually intervention.